Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to our V-GovCon Summit. And this is a virtual summit that we're having. Sometimes we do these in different states. So this one is our virtual summit. So welcome. Our theme today, CMMC, what, when, and how. And so today you're going to be able to learn about the cybersecurity maturity model certification. And as a small business, what are some of the things that you need to put in place or know about to ensure that you have or you're able to improve that cybersecurity hygiene to do business with the government? A lot of times, the Department of Defense uses this, and some of the conferences that I've been to, they're also planning to incorporate it or flow it down to other agencies going to be using it in the future. So they'll start out with the Department of Defense, but they're looking at making this one of those frameworks where other agencies will be able to use. So wanted to provide you with the information that you need. I went to the 8A conference in Atlanta, Georgia last month, and CMMC was one of the major topics that was discussed. So I was able to have a conversation with Deltamine, and they agreed to be able to come on our V-GovCon Summit and be able to share some of this information with you. So I'm just so excited today that we have Alan with us, and we'll talk a little more about what he will be presenting and how we're going to incorporate that into our training portal. So welcome everyone. I know we still have some folks coming in. Some folks alerted me earlier that they were having issues, so just bear with us as we get them coming in. But in the meantime, we wanted to start. So again, welcome to our V-GovCon Summit today. All right, so we did a couple. I think I had one or two others that just joined, but we started with just everyone introducing themselves. If we have more time later on for those who are coming on just a little bit later, we'll ask you to introduce yourself. Feel free to use the chat to let us know who you are. So your name, your company name, and where you're calling in from. And you could also put some information about your services. So feel free, this is also a networking event for you. So feel free to use the chat to talk about your company, what you guys are doing, and anything that relates to our topics today. Okay? So again, feel free to use the chat. So today we're gonna just go through some of the things that we're covering in our training portal. Wanted you to get access to that. This presentation will be placed in our portal, so we want to make sure you guys have access, know how to get into our portal. So that's the first thing that I'll be talking about. And then after that, I'll be introducing Alan, who is our guest speaker, and he'll be covering understanding CMMC 2.0 compliance. And then after that, we'll finish up with Q&A session, and then we'll wrap up. So thank you all for giving your time today. And for some of you I know who are joining, CMMC is a topic that you want to know a little more about. And so that's why a lot of you are joining today. So again, thank you for taking the time to be able to join with us in this V-GovCon Summit. So for those of you, a little bit about me. I've been doing government contracting now for over 20 years. And I've worked with several agencies, NASA, NOAA, FAA, Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, USAID, and forgot to add on here, Department of Defense. So one of the contracts we currently have with Department of Defense, CMMC, is a topic that we're being discussed as a small business, how we implementing the practices of CMMC into our daily lives as a company. And I can tell you just the certification alone, the discussions that I heard at the 8A conference, they started where just trying to implement this where small businesses need to be able to get certified, and there were lots and lots of thousands of dollars discussions around that. And so one of the things that the Department of Navy administrator talked about at that conference is they're holding some of the things that they need to do around CMMC. They're holding on to those right now so they can clean some stuff up before they push it out again, requiring a lot of our small businesses to be able to do it. So Alan's going to cover some of the things that we need to know, and just so everyone know, you guys are learning. I'll be right there taking notes too when Alan's speaking. So make sure you're taking notes. We're also going to provide you with the slides, so you'll have that also. But in terms of my company is V Project Management Consulting. We've been up and running since 2009, and my background's in IT and also in project management. So a lot of times when I'm speaking at government conferences, it's about PMO, project program and portfolio management. And then when I'm speaking with small businesses, it's more about how I can become your GovCon coach. A lot of folks that I meet, they want to know how to get into government contracting. So I go across the US speaking at expos, summits, conferences to small business owners about how do you get into government contracting. And so for today, for V-GovCon Summit, one of the biggest discussions this year is about if you want to get to do business with Department of Defense and other agencies down the line, CMMC is one of the things that's being discussed that we need to know about now, because we can't wait till government makes the requirement that small businesses have to be certified to decide that we now want to know more about it. So wanting to bring you the information because this is a hot topic being discussed right now. All right, just a little overview about V-PMC. So we are a small business, and we're in the 8A program. We provide enterprise PMO services, and that includes project program and portfolio management. And then we also have a governance part of it where we can come in, and if you've got a vendor already doing the project management or program management work, we can come in and provide that oversight and from a governance perspective. And so this slide, we use this slide a lot for if we're meeting with government agencies. We've got one slide that tells a picture of what it is that we do, who we are, and what are some of the services that we can provide to government. So as a government contractor, you want to have a slide similar to this, because a lot of times when you're meeting with whether it's the small business offices or some of the program offices in government, they don't have time. So one slide, that's all they need from you. And so this slide helps us to provide the information they need, and this information is on our capability statement. All right, so today I'm focused more on showing you a demo of what it is that we're doing in our training portal. And so our training portal, we launched it earlier this year, and it's what we're calling our do-it-yourself service. So it's something where you just go in and you can start taking some of the courses in there. We do have free courses, and then we also have some that are paid. And then some of the courses we have in there are for folks who are part of our partnership program or executive coaching program. And so there are templates and different things that we'll put in there for them, and they just go and access it. So again, a do-it-yourself training portal where you can go in and at your pace, decide which courses you want to take. And then you've got access to those courses over a period of time. You can go back as many times as you need to be able to access what you need. So wanted to cover a little bit about that today. We will be putting the CMMC training that we're covering today in the portal, and I'll show you that. How do you access it? And so that's one of the discussions that I know you guys want to know where can I get it. So I'm giving you a little demo today of how do you access the portal, some of the GovCon training we have in there, and then where would you get the CMMC training that we're going to put in there for you. All right, so with this, I'm going to come out of this screen. I'm sharing, right? Everyone can see my screen? Just want to verify. Yes. Okay. All right, so with this, I'm going to go through what the training portal look like and then how do you access it. Be with me. All right. So I think I'm already logged in here. Hold on, wrong one, screen. So when you get to the portal, so I provided you so it's vpmc.talentlms.com, and this will be provided to you in the slides. I'm also adding it here so that you can have access to it. So I just added it to the chat. So when you get on here, if you've not been on here, I know some of you who are on this call today, you're already in here. So if this is brand new for you, that means you have not been in here yet. You go to sign up and you can add the information here. It's mainly looking for a username and a password. But if you've got social media, you don't need to create another login. You go to sign up under social media and you can log in with your existing Facebook, Google, or LinkedIn accounts. So with Google, if you've got like a business email, but it's under Google, you can sign up with that. Once you click that, you're just using the login that you already have. With that though, you already have to be logged into the computer that you're using. All right, and then if you already logged in before, meaning you've gone in before, then you can just click login, enter your user ID and password, or log in with your social media account, and then you get straight in there. Okay, and then so I'm just going to pull one up that we already have. So this is just me as a learner in here. When you get in, so there's the home. So there are different views. You get the home view. You can also click on course catalog and get that view. And so now you're seeing some of the courses that we have here for learners. Depending on the group that you're in, so if you're brand new, you're just getting in here, these are what you'll see. If you're in our executive coaching partner group, you will see a little more than this. Or if you're in our V-GovCon tribe partner group, you'll see, again, more courses than this. So this is where we have our free courses. And notice the Understanding CMMC 2.0 compliance. This was added today, and we'll talk through that. The Finding Contracting Opportunities on SAM course. Feel free to go through that. Gives you a lot of content here where you can figure out how to search these opportunities by state, by NAICS code, by WSB certification, by keywords, agency, and then we start providing links for you. So you can just go in, click on the link, and it will send you to a sam.gov page based on what the link says. So HubZone, opportunities, like in the 8A total small business, NAICS code. And then when you get to those links, you'll be able to find where you can edit or filter the opportunity to look at more opportunities. So again, think of this, we have folks that use this every single day. They're going in and they're just clicking those links. And I tell folks, hey, you could just take that link, bookmark it on your computer, and now you've got those links where you're using them every day to go and look at some of those opportunities. So again, this gives you guidance as how you can search opportunities by state. And so in some of these are videos. You might see some of them where it's text. So again, just go at your own pace and go and look at some of the training, the free training that we have here. So this is one of our free training again, finding government contracting opportunities on sam.gov. Then the other one that was added today is the Understanding CMMC 2.0 compliance. And with this, the video that, the briefing that Alan's going to provide today, it's already loaded here. And the next part is once we've got the video, we'll also add the video in there also. So again, feel free to start using our training portal to be able to access some of the training that you and your company need. Just know government contracting, you can't do it alone. And a lot of us, we need help. So one of the reasons why we created our portal is just to be able to provide the help that you need. Capability statement. So there's some here that we do have pricing on, and it goes through a whole length of different parts of the courses. And then in some cases you can get some templates. So again, these are things that we have on here. We add free courses every 2 months. And then if you are in our V-GovCon tribe, there are things that we add every month to you. We also have, let me go back to home. There are times when we might have on our calendar different events. So there are some that you might be able to see and some you're not able to see because you are not in those groups. So there are events that we'll put on here. Just go to your calendar and you'll be able to see some of those events. All right, I hope this was helpful for you. I'm gonna go back to our slide deck. We did have a couple folks join. We'll look at what our timing looks like. Any question on the portal? And for those who are just coming in, feel free to use the the chat to enter your company's information, your name, company name, where you're calling in from, and what services you're providing. And if you want to add any contact information for folks to reach out to you, again, this is a networking opportunity. Feel free to add that there. If you've got anything that you want folks to know in terms of services that you can provide to help them, feel free to add that there too. Doesn't matter for me. This is more of a networking opportunity for you to share what it is you're doing in your organization and for folks to have that information if they need it. All right, so just continuing, I hope that was helpful for you. So any questions on our training portal before I move on? No questions. All right. Let me just verify timing. All right, I got a couple minutes. I know we had a couple of you that joined, so you missed the part where we're just getting to know you. So if you joined, I'm gonna go through the list here. What we're looking is just for you to introduce yourself, name, company name, where you calling in from, and if you want to tell us what the main service or product that you're selling, that's fine too. So I'm gonna go to Krishna Lam.
Yeah, hello everyone. So we are Moxie IT Solutions. We are based out of Ashburn, Virginia. So primarily we are currently working with some of the state government and local government. So we are trying to expand in federal government in staffing and IT consulting area.
Awesome, thank you. I'm seeing Laquela. Laquela. All right, moving on to, hold on. Just checking, Beverly White.
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself. Again, my name is Beverly White. My company is BKW Transformation Group. We're a management consulting that focus on 4 competency areas: strategy, process, technology, and change management. all of which rolls up into a program office potentially in the layers that you spoke of recently. Most of our 99% of our work, maybe 90, because I've been doing some subcontracting of our work, is on the commercial side of the business. My background is with Accenture. We are trying to get into the government space, and we've spent the past 18 months subcontracting with government experienced vendors. And we felt that that was the best way for us to get our arms around a lot of the process and protocol that you're talking about. So as we continue to do subcontracting, we are looking to learn as much as possible to have a direct relationship with the government clients.
Awesome. All right, Don Hayes. Don, if you can introduce yourself, company.
Yes, can you
Okay,
hear
go
me,
ahead.
Varetta?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm just Don Hayes. I deal with human resource management, payroll services, and I'm here to see how what Alan has to offer, how it can benefit my company as well. That's
Awesome.
pretty much all I have to say.
Okay. All right, Laquela, I'm asking you to unmute, but if you're not getting that, then I'll come back to you. I think there is one other person that probably looked like they just dropped off.
Hello.
Okay, yes, we can hear you, Laquela. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Laquela Pegues. I am the owner operator for Laquela P Enterprises. We are a IT consulting agency specializing in IT project management, risk management, operations improvement, and media. So websites, graphic design. I'm located here in Orlando, Florida. Primarily, we work with small businesses, corporate and government, and we're looking to continue to leverage the government contracting space with more opportunities. So I look forward to learning more about this platform, and I enjoyed working with Varetta thus far.
Awesome, Laquela. I think we lost Nadine. All right, so we'll do another round of this. If we get some more folks coming on. Well, again, thanks everyone, and I hope you got a quick understanding of our training portal. Right now it's free, so anyone can get in there. We'll decide later on this year if we're gonna lock it down for a minimum payment or something. But right now, get in there, get access to some of the free stuff. If you see any paid stuff that you need access to, feel free to go through that process. If you are already an executive business partner with us or V-GovCon partner and you can't get access to some of the things that you're looking for, feel free to reach out to us and then we'll make sure you have the right access to what you need. Awesome. Well, we're about to now introduce Alan. So Alan Ureta is a qualified certified CMMC assessor and certified CMMC professional and cyber AV authorized instructor. I will tell you, I met Alan several years ago with Jessica Mine, who is the owner of Deltamine, and I felt like I was in the presence of a guru in everything that has to do with training. I just love being around Alan. I swear he's got, and it's not shown here, but I swear he's got like every single acronym that could go behind his name because he's always learning, always getting more training, and then he's offering that to us. So I feel like this man has a wealth of knowledge. I just love being around him. His presentation style just leaves you in awe of more. And so I just love just having him here as our guest speaker. And he is the managing director of Deltamine, and he's also a master instructor. Every time I talk with him and Jessica, Alan's out training some other folks, and I swear he does training every single day. But he has a wealth of knowledge, and when the CMMC came out, Jessica and I had a conversation, and she let me know that that's one of the things that they were working on for training, and they will be able to offer it. And I think I remember speaking with her last year about it. And then this year, once we launched our training, they reached out to us again to say, hey, can you add this to your training portal? And so that's how we ended up here today. So Alan brings a strategic and hands-on approach to addressing the evolving challenges of cybersecurity. I know we have several of you on here today who are in cybersecurity, and those are some of the services you're providing to government and your other clients, commercial clients. And so wanted to bring you that information. So Alan has a background in digital transformation, risk management, and governance, and he's dedicated to empowering organizations like yourselves with the knowledge and tools that are necessary to safeguard your digital assets in an increasing complex threat landscape. One of the biggest things in Department of Defense now is there's so many threats that they want to make sure as small businesses we are covered. We understand if we want to work with Department of Defense, what we need to have in place to be able to gain some of those contracts. And they're filtering it down now to subcontracts. So if you get a subcontractor or end up on a team where you're a subcontractor or teaming partner with a prime contractor, some of these cybersecurity things that needs to be in place, your company also have to have them in place. So those are some of the things Alan's gonna talk about today. So Deltamine has been a partner with V-PMC for several years now. I would like to say about 10. That's how long we go back with Jessica. Deltamine is a digital transformation risk and cybersecurity advisory. They also provide training and staffing, and they have over 25 years of experience serving the financial and government sectors. They are in New Jersey, New York area, so a lot of their clients are in that area. But I know we've been working together with them on several contracting vehicles. They are a partner with us on our Navy Seaport, and I know when we started doing business with the CATS Plus contracting vehicle, which is at the state of Maryland also. So I'd like to welcome Alan. I'm gonna stop sharing while he get his slides together. And Alan's gonna come and speak with us about understanding CMMC 2.0 compliance, and then he's also gonna be sharing the history of CMMC, how you prepare for it, and then some of the assessments that needs to happen. All right. Did I stop sharing? Yeah. Okay. All right. Alan, are you sharing yet?
I think I am. Just let me know if I'm not.
Okay.
Can you see my
No,
screen?
sorry, I had my other thing over it, so go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. You know, one thing to add about Deltamine, we're also a graduate 8A firm and also a provisional CMMC third-party assessment organization. So we're the good news is we have time to complete everything for everyone who's on the call so that you're ready for these Department of Defense contracts when they come out. But one of the main things that we want to do is really, I'm here to help offer my expertise and my experience in assisting your organizations in understanding what the challenges are and hopefully guide you towards achieving CMMC 2.0 readiness. Now, I speak to that in a specific way because right now, CMMC is not exactly law of the land. It just passed rulemaking. It is currently as a proposed rule because we have to go through some government bureaucracy, such as, you know, finalizing, getting feedback, incorporating feedback from the public into the actual final rule. And then it goes to Congress, and Congress basically gives it a stamp of approval. Now, I'm going to give you some of the good news is the fast pace has to occur because it is an election year. So we have to kind of be mindful that we are going to look at this sometime between the August and October timeframe as being stood up, which ultimately means from the government standpoint that this is a fiscal year 2025 endeavor. So be mindful. It's something that's going to happen, and you definitely don't want to get caught behind, because one of the requirements before bidding on a government contract will be to show your compliance at the CMMC level that the government designates. So with that being said, today's session is really on understanding CMMC 2.0 compliance. And very importantly, and just to reiterate what Varetta has just said, what we're trying to do here is make sure that we're identifying those threats that are affecting sensitive information. Think of your wallet. Your wallet has a lot of sensitive information about you. And yeah, they might steal your money, but what's more important is getting that driver's license, right? Making sure that your credit cards are back in your possession. Your cash you could do without because, hey, we'll always make more cash, but getting our identity stolen, that's sensitive information. Well, the government, as well as private sector firms, are also very, very worried about the protection of their sensitive information. So the Department of Defense really recognized this imperative, and they implemented the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program, which is known as CMMC, and this is version 2. And I'll get a little bit about version 1 in a moment. But CMMC 2.0 is a robust framework, and it's designed to standardize cybersecurity practices and processes across all defense contractors. And that's a capital A, capital L, capital L, all defense contractors and their subcontractors. And a little later, I'd like you to pay attention when I talk about inheritance and flow down. That affects you, particularly if you're a subcontractor to a prime who's held to a high CMMC level. You must also be covered as well. But we're looking at how do you as a subcontractor handle sensitive information? And we have a couple of terms, a lot of terms for covered sensitive, sensitive information. I mentioned a few. We talk about our personal information. We refer to that as PII, or personally identifiable information. But the federal government has very specific terms that we want to cover here, which is covered defense information. You've probably encountered controlled technical information, federal contract information, which all of you will be exposed to. Then we have controlled unclassified information. And if you've listened to any Pentagon briefings, you'll probably hear every so often that this briefing is covered under controlled unclassified information. And believe it or not, they do say these things in the beginning of these conferences. Now, with the cyber threats themselves emerging at an unprecedented pace, and when I say unprecedented, they're just hitting us one after the other, especially now with the advent of artificial intelligence. We are basically having to equip ourselves with the necessary cybersecurity measures to protect our country against nation-sponsored attackers and cyber criminals. So this is why the DoD looks at the CMMC framework to ensure that DoD suppliers are equipped with those skills and those practices and those protections. Now, here's the key. Hopefully this is why you're all here. It's navigating this landscape of CMMC compliance is challenging for many organizations, especially small businesses. There are a lot of firms out there scaring you. They're going to scare you. They're going to scare you by saying, this is a $100,000 plus endeavor. Maybe. I'll say maybe. Not that it's not, but I'll say it could be, but it's like sending your child to college. It's a $100,000 investment plus, right? If we have children in school. But we have to be able to manage it appropriately so that it doesn't have to be so challenging for us, especially small businesses. Because as small businesses are struggling to get involved in the supply chain, you have stringent requirements that the DoD set forth, and you're going to need some help, as Brett has mentioned. You're going to need help to overcome those obstacles. And so we're here to help. So in this session, what I'm going to do is I'll be diving into the history and the rationale of the CMMC compliance. I'll offer you some insights and strategies to help your organization navigate the journey. So I'm going to welcome you in joining me to get started on this path towards CMMC 2.0 compliance. Now, a lot of people say, oh, this is a history lesson, I'm going to bore you. But I need to kind of lay this out in front of you because this is the history of CMMC, and it just didn't start yesterday. And I say that because it was interesting when I heard the feedback coming back from, the proposed rule, and the small business community said, whoa, how'd this happen? And it didn't just happen. It's been around for a while, and it's been emerging in the past few years. So it wasn't something new. So guess what? When they went to the SBA and they said, where's this coming from? Why is this so important? Why do we have to comply with this? The SBA had their crack at it in 2021, and they asked for feedback from the community. Now, did they do a great job? That's up to you guys to define, but that's been something that's been out there for a few years. So you have to understand its origins and the evolutions in the broader landscape of cybersecurity, because there's a whole slew of cybersecurity regulations and frameworks, and it all goes back to 2002 with FISMA, the Federal Information Security Management Act. Now, this is an important act because it didn't just impact the federal government, it also impacted regulated industries. And so if you think about critical infrastructure, well, the DIB is going to be a regulated industry. And so as part of the defense industrial base, you are a member of that industry here. So this legislation in itself laid the foundation for federal agencies to develop, implement, and manage information security programs. Now, a few years later, in 2005, the Risk Management Framework Revision 1 came out. So that implies that there's a Revision 2. I didn't mention that one, but I just wanted to let you know that Risk Management Framework came back in 2005. Some good news here. All of this is public information. Secondly, and I didn't put it in here, but type down NIST, NIST. NIST.gov gives a whole slew of free information so that you understand this framework. You can get some presentations on it and you can learn it on your own. But it's the framework that provides a structured approach for managing cybersecurity risk within federal systems and indirectly to non-federal systems, which ultimately is the private sector. Now we fast forward to 2010 and Executive Order 13556, and that's when this executive order was issued that focused specifically on the protection of controlled unclassified information, or CUI. Now, this directive really underscored the importance of safeguarding sensitive but unclassified information across the government systems as well as their networks. Now, in 2011, FedRAMP came out. A lot of you may be familiar with FedRAMP, which is the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, which is better known as FedRAMP. And this aimed to standardize the security, the assessment, the authorization, and continuous monitoring of cloud products and services. And with the services, we include cloud service providers. And most of you, if not all of you, are already using cloud service providers. And if you plan on using cloud service providers within a government sector, within a government space, even it doesn't matter if it's Department of Defense, any federal agency, those products they need to be FedRAMP certified. So it's important that you understand these because these are going to they'll impact the products you use. Now in 2014, both FISMA and cybersecurity practices went some significant updates. So we got Revision 2, and FISMA went from being the Federal Information Security Management Act to the Federal Information Security Modernization Act. And this legislation really strengthened the federal government's cybersecurity posture by establishing policies and also enhancing the incident response capabilities and also promoting continuous monitoring practices. Now you're going to say, enough about FISMA. Why is this so important? Because it's the regulatory driver for everything that comes to us now. Everything in FISMA gets codified in what we call the Code of Federal Regulations. That Code of Federal Regulations shows up in the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulations, which we're kind of bound to. And if we want to do government contracting, particularly with the Department of Defense, we have to go to the DFARS, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Now, simultaneously in 2014, and this is another important framework just to consider for you in the IT area, it's the cybersecurity framework. And this provided more of a voluntary framework of best practices that helps organizations manage and reduce cybersecurity risk. Now, this is important to consider because each one of you, if you plan to do business with the federal government and the Department of Defense, you will need to start building out your cybersecurity program. Don't worry, it's not a big monstrous thing for small businesses, but it's something you should be mindful of, that it has to follow some framework. And this is the best framework to start. And if we go look a little bit to the north of that in 2005, you also have the risk management framework, which tells you how can I perform assessments against it, even for myself. So be mindful, there's a number of key frameworks that you need to understand because they set the stage for developing the CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, which builds on these foundations, right? And the foundations that's laid by these initiatives to bolster cybersecurity against, across the defense industrial base. So a little bit more, because we don't stop with our timeline there, because now this is a little bit more specific to CMMC. because the countdown here now starts with the Department of Defense's CMMC program, which in 2017 started with the introduction of DFARS 252-204-7012. And just as a fresh reminder, DFARS, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations Supplement, which is the federal acquisitions rigor as applied to the federal acquisition regulations for contracts that the Department of Defense will be undertaking. So this is important. If you are a defense contractor, it's actually required by defense contractors. And if you say, well, it's not in my contract, it's written in, whether you like it or not. And there's a doctrine called the Christian doctrine. Yes, it's Christian doctrine. The Christian doctrine is the overlying legal theory that says, I don't have to tell you that it needs to be part of your contract. I don't have to write it in order for it to apply. So this is important, particularly with DFARS 252-204-7012, which covers the requirements for safeguarding, for covering controlled unclassified information, particularly, and they refer to it as covered defense information and also cyber incident reporting for the Department of Defense, which means you are now on the hook to protect that same sensitive information. Secondly, you're required to report breaches and participate in, identifying, what those breaches are and helping the federal government do their investigations. Now, there are certain shortcomings in the regulatory requirements. So the DoD initiated the CMMC program to address the deficiencies. They look at DFARS 7019, which mandates the submission of your compliance scores. So each one of you has to have a compliance score. This is what they call the assessment requirements. You have to upload them into what they call the supplier performance risk system. You have to upload your scores there. Might not have known that, but you do. And you must have them in there when you bid. Now, you also look at 7020. So 7020 is another one that says you have to be available to be assessed. And it requires you to, to undergo Defense Contract Management Agency audits. Now, it's important to be prepared for these audits because you could potentially lose your contract if you win it, if you don't comply with those with the contract requirements, and the assessment, opens that up. Then there's the DFARS 7021, and this is that rule that I just mentioned. So this is the one that ushered in CMMC because it mandates compliance with CMMC. And I'll tell you right now, 2025 is the year it will happen. It's everything now is going to be preparing for it. But this framework looks to set up a tiered standard that's based on data sensitivity. And it also introduces a certification component. Now, if you've bid on government contracts before, you'll understand this because under the certification and representations, we are certifying a representation under the False Claims Act that we're telling the government the truth. Well, the government said, we're going to verify that now. And we're going to verify it with independent third-party assessors. So no longer is cybersecurity going to be left to someone's understanding of those requirements. They're going to be left to the independent understanding of those requirements and the verification and validation of those requirements for certain contracts with the federal government. So it's important for us to make sure that we understand these clauses because they will apply directly to your contracts. Now, CMMC did go through its revisions. I promised I was going to let you know. CMMC version 1.0 was the initiating framework. And it was pretty onerous. It had 17 domains, had over 134 controls. It was pretty big. And for small businesses to adhere to it, it was a little confusing too, I have to admit. But for small businesses, it was very difficult, very challenging. So CMMC 2.0 was announced with the 3-tiered approach. We have basic cyber, actually, I'm going to get into that in a moment, but we have basic, we have advanced, and we have expert hygiene. Each one of them aimed for compliance by small and mid-sized firms, while maintaining the integrity of cybersecurity standards. And the updated version really streamlined the model from 5 compliance levels to 3 compliance levels. And it really focuses on the most critical requirements for protecting the defense industrial base. Now, I got to tell you a little bit about CMMC because this is really around the 3 distinct levels of certification. Each are tailored to address varying degrees of cybersecurity requirements for the defense industrial base. Now, CMMC level 1, we call that basic cyber hygiene. Now, this is a foundational level that focuses on establishing fundamental cybersecurity practices to ensure basic defense against common cyber threats. And so I won't get into the basic cyber threats, but there are things like, well, somebody looked over my shoulder and they stole my password and they're now able to log in. Simple thing, but they're basic or common cyber threats. Now, organizations at this level have to conduct annual self-assessments, and they have to evaluate their adherence to 6 domains covering 17 practices. Not a lot, 17 practices. Now, while this level doesn't involve handling control unclassified information, it does set the groundwork for implementing essential cybersecurity measures required to protect federal contract information. And if you think about, well, what is federal contract information? I'll talk about it in a few, but it's information that you will definitely be handling. Now, moving on to the next tier, we move to CMMC level 2. This is advanced cyber hygiene. And at this level, organizations have to adhere to a more extensive set of cybersecurity practices, and it covers 14 domains and 110 practices. And unlike level 1, level 2, involves handling controlled, unclassified information that's critical to national security. Now, while organizations can still conduct self-assessments against specific contracts, they are also subject to 3-year or triennial third-party assessments to validate compliance. And those are going to be the ones that you have to meet or not meet, pass or you don't pass. Now, finally, we reach CMMC level 3 or maturity level 3, expert cyber hygiene. Now, this is really the pinnacle of cybersecurity maturity. It requires organizations to implement a comprehensive set of practices across 17 domains. Did I say 17 before, or did I say 14? I think I said 14 for level 2. Yeah, it's 17 domains, and there's 130 practices. Now, organizations that operate at level 3 handle CUI in high priority or the most critical defense programs. So compliance at this level necessitates certification from the Department of Defense for contractors that are supporting the most critical defense programs. Now, it's crucial to understand the scope and the implications of the CMMC certification for your organization. Every Department of Defense contractors needs to ensure that their organization is equipped with the necessary cybersecurity measures to protect sensitive information and also maintain compliance with the DoD requirements. Now let's talk about the ecosystem participants. This is not all of them, but these are the ones that I thought were most relevant for you to understand, because at some point, hopefully, most of you are going to be participating in this ecosystem. So we'll talk about what those are, because it's important for you to understand who they are, who make it up, and what are their roles in ensuring cybersecurity compliance across the defense industrial base. Now, central to the heart of CMMC ecosystems are what I like to say are the CMMC assessors. Now, these individuals have undergone rigorous training and examination requirements. These were established by the Cyber AB with the Department of Defense, and they've been granted a license to conduct assessments. Now, they conduct these assessments on behalf of the federal government as independent third-party assessors. Now, while they might or might not be employed by a CMMC third-party assessment organization or a C3PAO, they play a critical role in evaluating organization cybersecurity posture. Now, the C3PAO serves as the entity that's responsible for engaging with what we call, you guys, organizations seeking certifications, or OSCs, to conduct their CMMC assessments. Now, C3PAOs, through the CMMC assessment teams, are licensed to deliver comprehensive assessments as well as guide organizations through the certification process. Now, facilitating the accreditation and the oversight of assessors is the Cyber AB and the CAICO. And this body will establish and maintain the CMMC community and establish a set of qualified and trained assessors. And they'll also ensure that there's consistency and quality in the assessment outcomes across the participating organizations. Now, you'll hear me say CAICO. I just want to say it out loud. It's the Cybersecurity Assessor and Instructor Certification Organization. They decided to pick a big name and then shorten it to CAICO, which kind of to me means something else. But that's going to be what they call it. So we have the Cyber AB that's responsible and accountable for certifying you as an organization. So they're going to allow us to certify you. And then the CAICO certifies individuals like myself and a few people who are on the call. So it qualifies the individual. So be mindful, there's 2 organizations, they're kind of tied at the hip, but they do 2 different things. One's about organizations, the CAICO is about people. Now, you are considered an organization seeking certification as a member of the DIB. And you're the entity that undergoes the actual CMMC assessment process to achieve certification for your respective environment. Whether you're a prime defense contractor or a subcontractor, OSCs are committed to upholding cybersecurity best practices to safeguard sensitive information. Now, the last one I exploded out a bit, but it's really, we refer to them as external service providers. And these are the entities who play a pivotal role in the CMMC ecosystem. These third parties offer not dual, but they offer cloud-based platforms, infrastructure, applications, or even storage services. And they potentially house sensitive, unclassified information that's subject to CMMC certification. Now, their adherence to cybersecurity standards is crucial in maintaining the integrity of the defense supply chain. Now, they're important because I'll bet money each one of you has at least one CSP, if not 2 CSPs, maybe 5 or 6 CSPs. So you have to be mindful if they manage, if they store, process, or transmit sensitive information, specifically CEY or FCI, they are in scope for these assessments. So be mindful, very important for you to consider what is and what isn't sensitive information from the government standpoint, particularly the Department of Defense. Now, this is where we get into, well, what is that kind of information? Just intrigued me. I'm curious, what is that information? So it's important to first start saying sensitive information and your business. When we start looking at that, it's important to consider information in the context of any business, especially with respect to the protection of sensitive information. And more importantly, sensitive information that's critical to your success and is subject to attack by competitors or even any other adversaries. The federal government, the DoD, are not the only ones that bad actors or criminals or adversaries, they're not just after that information. I'm pretty sure you've heard about cyber breaches at Sony and cyber breaches at Target and cyber breaches. Yeah, they're going to be cyber breaches all over the place, and they're going for your information. So it's important for your business. All businesses deal with sensitive information. So the CMMC program, in my opinion, sets a framework for you to use, not just to protect the government side or the government's interest, but it protects your interests. Cybersecurity is a business imperative. Whether you decide, I don't plan on doing government contract anymore, guess what? In the private sector, it's a business imperative. Now, I wanted to address a little point before that I think that I heard Varetta mention. This CMMC model, while it addresses the Department of Defense, controlled unclassified information applies to the entire federal government. All of it, not some of it, all of it. So even though the Department of Defense has a formal program in place, the National Archives and Records Administration, they basically are accountable for all federal agencies. And they're accountable for the protection, at least the program for protection, for all federal agencies to protect controlled unclassified information under the Information Security Oversight Office, the ISU. So when you look at that, you say, oh, I didn't think I'd have to worry about it. And the answer is, you don't have to worry about it this second. But guess what? Federal government is really getting behind CMMC in a big way. And not only is the federal government getting behind it, other countries are getting behind it as well. Canada's already noted that they're adopting it. Australia is looking to adopt it. Germany is looking to adopt it. Other countries are looking to adopt it. So it's not going to be something that's going to stay idle within the Department of Defense. It's getting bigger. And within the federal agency space, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Education, Department of Energy, they're all agencies that are looking to develop their programs based on the success of CMMC. And if CMMC is not successful, they will come up with their own programs. Hopefully CMMC works out nicely like FedRAMP did, and it'll apply to all federal agencies, which then expands your opportunities. So be mindful. We're looking at making sure that the processes are in place that are going to help you as a contractor kind of engage the federal government in productive work for the government while protecting our national security. Now, the certification requirements under the CMMC level are really driven by the type and sensitivity of the data being stored in order to support contracts with the Department of Defense. Level 1 really focuses on FCI, Federal Contract Information. And so we're saying, well, how's that different from CY? And there's a definition for it. FCI is, like the acronym implies, the contract part. It's work that's produced under contract with the federal government. And guess what? Everyone, if anyone's ever bid on a proposal, RFP, and that proposal gets accepted, and so you win the contract, that proposal and the RFP effectively become FCI because you produced it under a contract. And any artifacts or information that's generated under that contract is FCI. So think about that from that perspective. If they're asking you for a blueprint, if they ask you for a video, if they ask you for an audio, you might be contracted to make a podcast, for argument's sake. It could be any of the above. Are you processing anything that has sensitive budget information or sensitive people information or sensitive location information? FCI, FCI, FCI at the least. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about what controlled unclassified information is, because this requires a higher level of maturity. And with the introduction of CMMC 2.0, we started looking at what are those extended information. And by the way, CMMC level 2, and I'll talk about CMMC level 2 and 3 kind of in the same vein, because CMMC level 2 really focuses on the confidentiality of information, particularly in storing, transmitting, and processing that information. So this information we call CUI, and CUI, CUI basically is information that the government creates, processes, or requires handling with safeguarding or dissemination controls. Then we move a bit further up the ladder to CMMC level 3, and this focus now shifts from confidentiality to the integrity of information and its use, storage, and transmission of CUI. And this level really addresses a more advanced cybersecurity measures for protecting sensitive data, like technical documentation that's critical to national security. And by the way, you can do self-assessments at level 1. And I'll tell you right now, if you do it by yourself, you probably might be subject to an audit. So just be mindful, you have to be very truthful and very accurate in how you provide the information. Level 2, you require third-party assessor organization. And then level 3 is obviously it's going to be done by the government, the federal government under the DIPCAC, which is the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center. They perform level 3 assessments. Now, why is it important to you? Now, you'll see two key words. I call it day in a life, or dial, and business as usual, or BAU. And we want to know what the impact of CMMC on your business is. Because if you're going to decide you're going to engage in contracts with the DoD, you're going to say, well, this is kind of important. So it's important for you to understand the significant challenges you might encounter in your day-to-day operations. Now, the first one, there's increased compliance requirements. As a DIB contractor, you have to adhere to a specific cybersecurity requirements that are outlined in the CMMC framework, not just the CMMC framework, but let's go a little bit back to the history. 7012, 7019, right? So we've got to remember those clauses that basically said you must protect it. Now it also talks that you must report it. Then we get all the way to 7020, where we talked about the CMMC framework, which by 2025, you must also adhere to that specific requirements. But it's going to look at investments in technology, processes, and personnel to achieve compliance. Now, I'm going to say this right now, these are investments, right? Because you need to get a return on these investments. If any contractor or any advisor or consultant group says, oh, you need to have that for the sake of, of compliance, bad answer. So you have to then start asking the questions. If I'm not going to use it, why do I need it? And that becomes the critical question. So I'm going to lay that up because the financial burdens are going to be next. Because implementing some of these cybersecurity controls and obtaining CMMC certification can incur substantial costs, including some expenses related to technology upgrades. I've spent months, just on this note, because there was a big, I don't know if you guys were looking, but there was a lot of promotions from all these third parties, these ESPs, saying that you must do this. It must cost this much. And the answer is no, it doesn't. What we need to do is find the solution that fits your organization for the types of contracts you perform. And there's easy and inexpensive, relatively inexpensive ways. But right now, you probably are already spending money on services with your cloud service provider like Microsoft or Amazon. that you might not be benefiting or making the full benefit from. For example, multi-factor authentication, it's built in. Why would you need to pay more for it? So you have to think about some of those things that you're going to be looking to incur an expense and say, maybe I just need a consultant to help me, an advisor to help me. Maybe I might just need to read into it a little bit more or get some training in this, because as I mentioned before, business imperative will require for you to have a clean understanding of that. So you're going to look at some costs, and these are going to be some technology upgrades, perhaps. Hiring cybersecurity experts. We like to call them MSSPs, managed security service providers, and also engaging with some third-party assessors who are going to say, this is what you're going to be assessed against. Have this package ready. There's also the problem with resource constraints. So the resource constraints will include time, budget, and expertise. And for my project managers out there, that that's going to be a key challenge. That, especially when you're implementing and maintaining required cybersecurity measures. We're also going to look at competitive disadvantage. And typically we'll talk about the competitive advantage of CMMC certification, but we have to look at what's the disadvantage if you do not receive your CMMC certification. And it might mean that you are ineligible for DoD contracts, or you could lose some competitive advantage against a larger competitor they've achieved compliance. So you can effectively not be able to bid against them, even though you may have the best capabilities, better than your competitor. You might not win it because you didn't get your certifications in place. We look at operational disruptions, and this is where we prepare and undergo for the CMMC assessments that might disrupt normal business operations, because you have to take time away from what you're there to do business, while you're in business, and then you might get disrupted. So it might look at reallocating resources and take attention away from some core activities. So think about it. It's always a battle we have to face, that we have to engage in new business development while we're running the business, and that's going to compete for resources. We also have to look at supply chain impacts. Now, this is going to be critical because the impacts of the supply chain is really at the core of why we're performing CMMC, because there are leakages in the supply chain. Information gets out of the supply chain. Our adversaries get that information, and then they build competing products. And I'll use an example because you'll probably hear this quite a bit about the Chinese. Yes, the Chinese have programs in place to exfiltrate information so they can build jet fighters that are as good as American jet fighters. That's a scary proposition. Before, we were the only country in the world who had fourth generation jet fighters. Well, Chinese right there, and so are the Russians. So we have to be mindful that we don't want to give up any more information, even accidentally, through vulnerabilities in our supply chain. So it's important for us to look at, the pressure that we're going to receive, from prime contractors and subcontractors to make sure that they can demonstrate compliance to the Department of Defense. So there's going to be increased scrutiny and increased demands on evidence of compliance, and you need to know what those things are. Then we have contractual obligations. So not only will the DoD impose some contract terms on you already, which are already going to be scrutinized, they may impose additional cybersecurity requirements in addition to the level 2 or the level 1 requirements. So this might lead to additional obligations and liabilities for small businesses, especially if you're a subcontractor, because your level of certification will mandate what the ceiling is on the type of work you can do. So if you have a prime contractor who has a level 2 contract, and obviously they're level 2 certified, and you're only a level 1, that's all the work you can do. You can only do level 1 work for them. That puts you out, right? You can't do level 2 work, which might be the juiciest part of the work. It might be the more profitable areas of work, but you'll be limited. So you want to be a level 2 with a level 2 contract, a level 1 with a level 1 contract. But you definitely, I'm going to say level 1 is the low cost entry. Level 2 obviously are the juicy contracts with the Department of Defense. At least that's where they're going to lie. And I want you to keep in mind that these are all investments that you're going to say will spur growth. So timing is going to be important, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Then the last item here is continuous monitoring and maintenance. Remember, it's not just about being one and done. It's not just about showing I'm certified, done, here's my certification, then you go on and forget about your cybersecurity program. Your cybersecurity program, this is one of the key challenges, is making sure it's achieved and maintained. So it has to be continuously monitored, assessed, and maintained. So it puts another strain on your limited resources, especially for small businesses. Now, I got a 10-step approach. So you didn't think I was going to leave you with no 10-step approach. Of course, there's a 10-step approach because it's important and crucial for organizations of all sizes to stay ahead of the curve and make sure they're adequately prepared to meet the requirements for CMMC. Sorry, keep clicking on the wrong thing. Where was I? My 10-step program here. All right, so CMMC outlines itself, it outlines the specific requirements for organizations that are contracting with the Department of Defense to ensure that they have robust cybersecurity practices in place. Now, to properly prepare a small business, here's the 10-step program. First, all of you should understand CMMC requirements. Just because the word CMMC is in there, don't get nervous or don't get scared or it's just you have to understand the requirements for your business. You have to familiarize yourself with the framework and the specific requirements that are applicable to your organization's level of certification. If you want to be CMMC level 1, there are 6 domains, 17 practices. Go through them. They're going to be written into your CMMC level 1 contract. If it's CMMC level 2, there are 14 domains and 110 practices. They will be written into your contract. So think of it as, as boring and tedious reading through those RFPs are. This is the same type of work. Understand it because you want to make sure you're in compliance. Second one is you should perform a gap assessments against your own organization, against your own cybersecurity practices with, and again, you're going to be using the CMMC requirements to identify any gaps that might need to be addressed. The third step is put together a remediation plan. We like to call them POAMs. I don't know if any of you have dealt with plans of actions and milestones. These are POAMs, but you're going to create your own detailed plan to address those gaps and prioritize actions based on risk and impact. Next step, you're going to implement the necessary controls. Here, you're going to implement the required security controls as well as the practices that are outlined in the framework to meet the desired maturity level. So your desired maturity level is level 1 or level 2, and perhaps even level 3. I'll tell you, that's a reach for a lot of small businesses. But for example, let's say Boeing or Lockheed Martin got a level 3 contract. You're going to want to be at least a level 2. And then you say, I might get more business locked in with that large prime contractor if I am a level 3. However, that does require a lot more rigor. So let's worry about level 1 and then level 2 next. Our next thing is, and this is not required, and I'll say it's not required from a assessment perspective at level 1, but you need to document your policies and procedures. And a lot of small businesses, but I'm not a large corporate entity. Why do I need to document policies and procedures? It's because it provides us evidence and consistency for your own organization. So you have to document your cybersecurity policies, procedures, and your processes to ensure compliance with CMMC requirements, as well as to help facilitate audits. If the DCAA comes in to audit your organization, you'll say, here are my policies and procedures. Here's my artifacts. Here's my evidence. It makes it go a lot easier if you have them ready and they're not interviewing you for things that are on the top of your head or they're buried in an email from months ago. You have them all together and it's all nicely packaged. The next one is provide employee training. A lot of times people say, well, I've gone through the framework and employee training is a level 2. False. Employee training is a level 1, and we're expecting employees to be educated. And even though there is no formal awareness and training at level 1, level 2 says you have to educate your employees on cybersecurity best practices, especially on their roles in protecting sensitive information. It's a basic cybersecurity tenet that kind of moved into a level 2 certification, but it is needed for level 1. You need to know how to protect this information. So it's important for you to kind of provide that employee training. And Varetta kind of showed in her LMS. You might adopt the LMS and say, Varetta, do you have any cybersecurity onboarding training that's in there? She might add it. But those are the kind of things we're looking to do. And again, they serve to protect your business. And more importantly, how to comply with CMMC requirements. By the way, if you are in, there is a mandatory DoD certification training that's available for free. And so I'll post that. I'll send that to Varetta, but it's a Department of Defense mandatory CUI training, and it's free, by the way. It's only an hour, but it tells you everything you need to know. Plus, you get a little certificate from the Department of Defense that says, hey, you took CUI training. But you do have to do that if you're going to do level 2. That's actually a requirement for most government contracts. For not most, but at least for the DoD. Our next step, step 8, is to secure the supply chain. Now, this is where you start looking at your inventory of contractors. Who do you subcontract to? Who are your cloud service providers? So you inventory, but you also have to look at another facet and say, are they in compliance? Not just myself, are they in compliance? And when you're selecting these vendors for yourself, after you secure, you're going to say, are they providing me the protections I need, or do I have to provide protections for them? Which would be kind of like the reverse. So you'd say, I'd like to hire contractors who are actually in compliance, whether they're using FedRAMP certified products or whether they themselves are also CMMC certified to support my organization. Very important, and I'll talk about inheritance and also flow down in a moment. And then you have to then, at the last step, I always put it, engage with CMMC assessors. Now, there's 2 ways to engage. You can engage them as consultants. You could say, I'm going to engage you as a consultant to help me out with the closing, crossing the T's, dotting the I's for my initial scores. Or you might hire a C3PAO and get a CMMC assessor to come in and certify you. And that's a sequence of events. One has to happen before the next. You have to prepare for a CMMC assessment. Otherwise, you're never going to pass that CMMC assessment. So you should prepare by saying, I have all the artifacts, I have all the evidence, I've identified all the people who are going to be interviewed, I have all the mechanisms or the tools and the technologies that are going to be used to demonstrate compliance. I have them all in place here, and hand it over. 9 times out of 10, you would be more prepared than you need to be. That's not a bad thing. A lot of people think that, oh, you're wasted my time. No, it's not a bad thing. The government's looking to certify you to do business. And your consultants are probably telling you a couple of extra things to do, as I just did. You need to do a little bit of extra just to make sure you understand what your business imperatives are. So starting with this checklist, small businesses should be able to prepare for CMMC certifications and also enhance your cybersecurity posture. And again, the whole point here is to protect sensitive information as well as meet the DoD contractual requirements. Now, here we're looking at addressing CMMC compliance for small businesses. And in this case, it's important to understand the reliance on external service providers, those providers that are the ESPs. This is where I talk about the inventory, right? The inventory of your contractors, of your third-party providers. Now, in navigating the complexities of CMMC compliance, it's crucial for you to understand inheritance and flow down and how they apply to the interactions with service providers. Now, inheritance involves leveraging a provider's existing CMMC compliance to meet some of your organization's compliance, the compliance requirements. This means you can inherit their security posture. So if you're using Microsoft, Microsoft says, we give you a lot of these features you're looking for, and we are CMMC level 2 or 3 certified. And if Microsoft's level 2 or 3 certified, guess what? You inherit their security controls. Now, that's important because number one, if I go into your organization as an assessor and you say, well, we're using Microsoft, I say, okay, I don't have to worry about that part of the assessment. Show me Microsoft certification, which by the way is publicly posted. And CMMC not yet, because they just went through a joint surveillance of their own with the DIVCAC. So they are ready, quote unquote, ready. And when CMMC comes out, they'll be one of the first ones, one of the first organizations that will be CMMC. And I'll probably argue level 3 certified, which means obviously they'll cover all the security requirements you'll need. And better yet, if you do business with Microsoft, for example, because I'm not promoting Microsoft, I'm just telling you, for example, you can inherit their protections. You can say, oh, they have multi-factor authentication. I'll just say check, because Microsoft's already proven themselves as a certified organization. So that's what I mean by inheritance. Now, flow down refers to your contracts. So flow downs refers to contractually obligating your organization's ESPs to meet specific CMMC requirements. So for argument's sake, let's say that your third parties do not have any CMMC coverage or FedRAMP. They have to be included in your certification scope. as if they were you, which then adds time, effort. You have to now involve them and say, I need to have your people available. They may charge you for it. So there may be problems there when you're trying to get your own certification, and it hinges on your third party not having theirs, because then you have to make sure that those protections are in place for them. So that's where we have to kind of start looking at the protections. So to understand inheritance and flow down as it's applied to your ESPs, there's a couple of things you should do. First, understand your business's CMMC requirements and understand the CMMC level your company needs to achieve based on its involvement with the Department of Defense. And not just the Department of Defense, you could be a subcontractor or even a goods provider to that subcontractor. You have to understand where you are. And remember about FCI. I talk about this quite a bit with respect to if you purchase a specialized widget from a third party, but the government gave you no specifications, it doesn't need CMMC certification unless the government gave you instructions on how to build it. So if I'm buying a widget and it's just basically a generic widget that anyone can buy, simply because the government uses it does not make it FCI. So it's a very important distinction, because for example, if we're talking about calipers, these specialized calipers that this Japanese firm makes, well, the Navy uses them to measure, measure their guns, the diameter of their guns on their Navy ships. So they use it. Well, a lot of people say, well, that's FCI then. No, but it's not. The government didn't give them specifications on calipers. They had the calipers, and the Navy said, that's awesome, we want to buy them. That does not mean that they need to get CMMC certified. However, if the federal government, the Navy, turned around and says, we are giving you specifications on developing these specific calipers that we need to use, it is FCI. So just be mindful of the nuances of the procurement will determine whether or not it requires even level 1 certification. Now, the second step is to inventory your ESPs. You really have to list them, any providers that handle or protect sensitive information or support your IT systems. Now, at this point, you're not going to distinguish between FCI or CUI. It's sensitive information because we're looking at all the assets. And we're not looking at this as being a CMMC compliance exercise exclusively. We're saying, wow, I have other information that needs to be protected, like perhaps credit card information, perhaps some critical passwords to my bank account. Perhaps, so there's going to be a whole bunch of other systems. You want to inventory any external service providers that handle any sensitive information that supports your IC, or even that support your IT systems. And so these are MSPs, managed service providers, MSSPs, managed security service providers, as well as the most common CSPs, cloud service providers. And by the way, a CSP or rather an MSP can be all three. I like using the ESP to kind of be the broader term, but it could be an MSP, an MSSP, or a CSP, and you can have a mix and match of those three, particularly if you are in the IT support area. Now, you also need to request CMMC compliance status from those organizations. If you have a service agreement, and again, I use Microsoft a lot because they're kind of like good at making sure they're in compliance and they make it publicly available. You really should ask them for it. So please give me your service agreement. They might just send you over a URL link that says on this web page, you'll see our certification from the DIBCAC. That's enough. So you're going to have to ask them to give it to you, or they might turn around. And I think they're still considering whether they're going to use ISO certifications, ISO 27000 certifications. If they do, that's fine, but ask them for their compliance status. And we're going to be more specific around CMMC. If you are a CMMC level 2, your third party should be CMMC level 2. And even with this request, you should really need to evaluate your service provider security, especially if they do not, if they don't assess the provider security controls and documentation. So you need to make sure that they're aligned. And again, here's where NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, comes into play. You're going to look at NIST SP 800-171, which is the underlying standard for CMMC, and say, do you comply with that standard? Because I have to. I have to under the DFARS clauses. So I have to comply with them. So therefore, they have to comply with them because you're responsible under inheritance and under flow down. And then lastly, you're going to need to incorporate flow down requirements into your existing contract arrangements. So you're going to have to say, not only is it in my agreement with either the government or the prime, it's going to be in my existing contractual requirements with my CSPs. So you have to define shared responsibilities for CMMC compliance, as well as any other types of outlying security controls. Now, you really should you should partner with a qualified CMMC consultant for guidance, and you're going to look for MSPs or MSPs that specialize in CMMC compliance. Remember, we talked about FedRAMP. Cloud service providers with FedRAMP certifications might demonstrate alignment with CMMC requirements. But remember, CMMC compliance in this regard is a shared responsibility. So there might be things that they have to do. For example, Microsoft can provide you the features of things like multi-factor authentication. You have to make sure they're in your policies and that it's turned on and that somebody can't turn it off. So that's going to be your job, their job, and your job. You should have these shared responsibilities outlined in your agreements. Now, there's a readiness checklist I want to put together very quickly so you understand the types of components that you're looking to have in order to actually be ready for CMMC certification. So the first thing you should do is have a self-assessment or pre-assessment that's conducted internally by someone who's knowledgeable in CMMC. They have that expertise at level 1, so they can gauge your organization's current state of readiness. Now, you can actually hire an external resource or consultant, or it can be an in-house employee that you send to train. Now, this person would focus on collecting the anticipated evidence, which is documentation and evidence that's needed to demonstrate compliance with CMMC. Now, these things could include things like a security policies and procedures. It's really important to review the existing policies and procedures to make sure they align with the CMMC standard. You should document your infrastructure with a network diagram. And this is just basically like a Visio diagram or a visualization of your organization's network to identify any potential security vulnerabilities. You'll also need to understand the way information flows through your organization using what we call a data flow diagram. It might have different names for you, but like a swim chart, a swim lane chart, an ICOM chart, those kind of things. But this is a visualization that shows how data flows within your organization in order so you can assess data security and privacy risks. Now, you also need to have an organization chart, and preferably an organization chart with an explanation of what the roles are. So that way you can ensure who's accountable for cybersecurity. It also helps identify who assessors will be interviewing. And then so part of that, who they're going to interview, we want to really underpin them by those job roles and responsibilities, particularly as related to security, right? Because we want to make sure that its security controls are being managed properly by people. And all this would be included in a system security plan. Very, very important to have it because it really will outline your organization's approach to managing and securing its information systems. And even though these are not required for level 1, you should really have you should really have them in place because, they're part of your company's business plan. Now, readiness planning, just to give you a quick idea as you progress through readiness, the next step is really coming up with a good plan for remediating those gaps and deficiencies. And this plan takes shape based on the findings of the readiness assessment and the gap analysis, and it'll involve addressing gaps in people, processes, or technology to make sure it aligns with CMMC. Now, because every organization is different, you need to take several considerations for remediation that include, things like what is the severity of the gaps? You need to really identify the critical control gaps. Some organizations are, they're hyper secure, some aren't. Some are just getting started. They just started up maybe a month or two ago. You're going to need to identify those critical control gaps that require significant system changes that will take, a bit longer to address than minor policy adjustments. You're also going to need to consider your existing security posture. If your organization has a secure foundation or a robust foundation in security controls, you might be able to implement missing controls much more quickly. And then probably the most important consideration is resource availability. CMMC compliance requires a dedication, a degree of dedication, and the availability and commitment of IT staff, budget, and other resources are going to impact the pace of remediation efforts. Now, the level of effort needs planning based on the CMMC level sought. Generally scoping the effort that's based on the current state, we can kind of look at what's your timeline. So if you're looking at CMMC level 1, which is basic safeguarding, you really are going to look at dedicating between 2 to 4 months of your time. And this is going to focus on documenting existing controls and implementing minor adjustments. At CMMC level 2, which is advanced safeguarding, it's going to range between 6 months to 12 months. And this might be needed for the implementation of additional controls that's based on NIST 800-171. And it's going to depend on the complexity of the missing controls. And then at CMMC level 3, expert safeguarding, even though we don't necessarily do certifications at level 3, we can, meaning advisors and consultants, can help you achieve a level 3 because there's going to be a degree of work that won't be done. The government's not going to do it for you, and you're going to need some advice. So this one will require a more highly mature security posture, and also extensive remediation efforts might be required. So this might take anywhere between 12 to 18 months for completion. So that's the highest rigor you'll find. So what's on the horizon for your business? And so in today's evolving landscape, CMMC compliance is a journey, not a destination. And embracing a proactive stance really is important because it recognizes that it is a business imperative, irrespective of industry. And as we're going to dive deeper, into the government space, particularly the Department of Defense, you really need to enhance your comprehension of the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, as well as acquaint yourself with the Supplier Performance Risk System, SPRS or SPRS, and that becomes pivotal. It's not just about getting your SAM.gov account. Now you have to get your PIE account, your PIEE account. That PIEE account gives you access to SPRS. Once you get into SPRS, you have to be able to upload your scores. And everything I just kind of laid out in front of you is how you come up with the score that will help you gain at least level 1 certification in the short term. But more importantly, it will require it's required at present day. It is required for you to upload your scores into SPRS for Department of Defense contracts anyway. So you might as well take that as a first step to your CMMC compliance as the next steps. So I think that thorough research is going to be essential. And we're going to look at both the CMMC program. So you can go to the cio.dod.gov site, which is the Department of Defense Chief Information Officer's website. And I think they just posted on their site, I think it just recently updated, the CMMC program. The second one is the Cyber AB, the official CMMC website at https://cyberab.org. So you can go there to both places, and I would say that's where you can start learning a lot more about CMMC program, and more importantly, how it's going to be applied to you, to your organization. Now, it's important to recognize that compliance frameworks will cover a shared responsibility between the client and the ESPs. So also understanding the requirements for compliance will help you do business with your third parties, but ensure ongoing eligibility for specific contracts so that you have seamless business operations in place. All right, so I want to thank you, and looking forward to working with you or seeing you again as you chart a course towards a more secure and prosperous future for your business. On the screen's my LinkedIn. I did post it in the chat, but if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. That was such a wealth of information. I got like 2 pages of notes here already. So I'm hoping everyone else that you guys were able to take some notes. Again, you guys will be getting the slides and the video once we have that ready for you. But now we're opening it for any questions that you have for Alan. And I think we have enough where you can just unmute and ask the question. If I see any conflict, I'll try and resolve them. But feel free to unmute and ask your question. And while you guys are coming up with your questions, one of the questions I had, Alan, was when you talked about those vendors, right? The external service providers that we already have right now. So
Right.
in my case, I use Google. My whole company is on Google. So I know Google should be already where they have a lot of the security things in place. But so if I'm using Google, let's say Drive, and I'm putting some of the contract information on there, let's say got a brand new contract, the contract award information, and now contract management, where we're managing the contract. So I'm putting whether it's my staff that's going to be on the contract site, their VAR information and different things that they have to do just to get their secret clearance. And then I'm also putting contract information, so status reporting, financials, all of that. And I'm putting that on Google Drive. So are you saying that now Google Drive is going to be part of one of those service providers that we're using? So now they already have those controls in place. So we're just using Google's at that point?
Well, here's how it works, and I'll give you some good news. So Google Workspace is a FedRAMP authorized provider. So first off, they're already authorized at FedRAMP High, which is pretty good. And that happened back in November 2021. And I know this because I had to research it, because I didn't believe that Google themselves was FedRAMP authorized. I said, how can they be when their core technology effectively goes outside of what I call a secure enclave? Because it does. But somehow, some way, they were able to basically achieve FedRAMP High. So the government turned around and said, well, they are. And this is not that, so it turned from being my opinion to being a fact that they are secure. Now, technically, Google is technically CMMC compliant. I mean, so I'm going to say that right now without CMMC being in place, because they are able to meet the requirements of NIST SP 800-171 under FedRAMP, as well as CMMC 2.0, which uses the same standard. Now, how do we change things around? Well, we have to look, right? We have to do all the things I kind of mentioned. We have to inventory our assets. We have to look at the flow of information. We have to look at those things so you can say, well, eventually all my information lands on my Google Drive. Okay, so we don't have to worry about Google so much as we worry about how you're handling it. Are you encrypting that information on the Google Drive? And if the answer is yes, well, then you're good. I'm going to also say, are you using multi-factor authentication when you're logging into your Google Drive? And you'll say, maybe not. And I'm going to say, I know it seems like a little bit of a pain, but every time you log in, it should ping your phone on the Google Authenticator. You log in, you close out that authentication, now you're in. And moreover, there's a whole series of little activities you can do, not onerous. Google gives you Google Workplace gives you, or rather, Google Workspace gives you multi-factor authentication. Whether you turn it on or not is your call. However, if you're going to look for CMMC certification, I'm going to say, Varetta, show me your policies and procedures relating to securing your Google Workspace. And you're going to say, Google does that. Not a good answer. So I'm going to say, Varetta, let's see your policy. Your policy is going to say you log into Google. No individual is allowed to access Google without multi-factor authentication turned on. You tell your Google administrator, whoever on your company is handling Google for you, make sure that it's normally just a little checkbox. Turn multi-factor authentication on.
Yes, it is.
But the important part is not so much that you can turn it on and off. It's that somebody who's not authorized to turn it off can turn it off. So it can't be, Varetta, I hate using this multi-factor authentication and it's terrible and I hate it. You can't say, oh, I'll let you slide on that one. That cannot be allowed. So a lot of these things are going to be procedural in nature, but the idea here is that Google and as a platform itself is already secure. As a platform infrastructure, they're handling some of the stuff. You now need to handle the rest of the stuff. And that's the shared responsibility part. So that's why I say you have to kind of look at the specifics of the data flow. If you're saying, oh, all I'm putting into that Google Drive are our company information. I say, okay, where are you storing your RFPs? You say, oh, that's going into my CRM system. That's another system. We're going to have to look at where you're storing your RFPs and things like that. I think we have a couple of questions that are posted as well.
Yes, if you can answer Beverly White first.
Sure. Okay, so you mentioned other company service providers. Would you say that AWS is in that category where we have a platform built on their internal network? Amazon is one of those companies that, yes, they are also CMMC ready. I'm going to call it CMMC ready because they are authorized. And the difference between, we have to start looking at architecture, whether you're looking at infrastructure, the platforms, and the software. Amazon, like Microsoft, has a marketplace, and that's software. That's the software that sits on top. So those have to be FedRAMP certified. But the next layer, which is the platform, has to also be certified for FedRAMP. But then they both have a base underlying infrastructure segment, and that has to be certified. Again, could be FedRAMP certified, and they typically will get a FedRAMP certification as being a cloud service provider. So I'm going to say that Amazon is a little trickier in that they allow a lot more flexibility, so there are a lot more moving parts. So for example, I can have infrastructure as Amazon. I can actually layer on top of it Microsoft as like Azure, and then on top of it, I can do all my goodies, all my other stuff that I do on it as applications. Depending on the complexity of how that's structured, you're going to say that Amazon that anything built on Amazon's infrastructure, we don't have to worry about whatever layers Amazon's providing. You do have to worry about the layers that aren't being handled by Amazon. And again, similar to Varetta's, to the response to Varetta, is that here we're going to say, if you have an app that sits on a Microsoft FedRAMP certified platform that sits on top of an Amazon Web Services infrastructure, I don't have to worry about Amazon. I don't have to worry about Microsoft. I have to worry about the application that sits on top of it. And is that one part of my security enclave? And that would mean that, does that little piece, that little app, do I have to get a FedRAMP, a CMMC certified? And I'd say, if it processes, stores, or transmits sensitive information, particularly CUI or FCI, yes, that becomes part of your scope. And then I'm going to have to say, can I get the specific as an assessor? Unless it's already FedRAMP certified, I'm going to say, I need to look at that application. I'm going to have to examine the security controls and accessing it. So that's kind of like a little bit more complex answer, but it depends on how it's built. That, to me, I'm going to call that one a Frankenstein infrastructure, because it takes different parts, different body parts from different places, and assembles them together. Sometimes it's a lot easier just to say, might go one provider with one service and one platform all in one package. That might work sometimes, and they're FedRAMP certified. Again, it depends on your business needs. Okay, so hopefully, Beverly, hopefully that's a good answer, unless if you have a follow-up. Nadine, Nadine Vasquez's question. My first question is similar to Varetta's. I was going to ask about Google and Safari. My second question is, how does this affect small businesses that is home-based, and what do you recommend? Okay, home-based. I'll start with the second one, because I don't know what you mean by Google and Safari. Safari is the browser. Google is the provider. So I'm not sure what that means. But let's talk about your second question. How does it affect small businesses that are home-based? Well, first of all, most businesses today, let's not call them home-based anymore. Let's call them remote, right? We're remote workers, right? We're not home-based workers. It makes us sound like we're knitting socks in the backyard. We're not. We're basically doing a very productive service, but we're doing it remotely. And it doesn't matter where you are nowadays. It's how you set up that remote infrastructure. And we do that with a novel new approach. It's not so new. It's been around since late 1990s, but it's virtualization. We have virtual infrastructure. We have a virtual desktop. We have a virtual network tunnel, VPN. We have a virtual cloud. We like to call those Amazon and Microsoft and IBM. So we have that kind of infrastructure. And then we can always use my iPad. I can use my phone. I can use my notebook computer, as long as the interface between me and my organization is through a virtual desktop interface. Now, if you're not familiar with it, it's a very quick Google search, but Microsoft has a product called Azure Desktop. I believe it's called Azure Desktop. I don't know if Google has one, but VMware is another company that's out there. It's a little pricier. VMware is a company that's out there that does virtualized desktop infrastructure. Another company is Citrix, and they have their virtual desktop infrastructure platforms. So you want to find a virtual environment. And if you have a virtual environment as a remote organization, guess what? I don't have a facility to go visit. So you score not applicable on, a couple of your key controls. That means I could do your assessment via Zoom. So I don't even have to visit you, which means the good news around CMMC assessments is you do not lose points for not applicable. And everything with scoring on CMMC is I try to say this, try to be as virtual as you can be. I mean, sometimes you can't avoid it, particularly if you're a manufacturing organization. If you're a manufacturing organization, you have a facility, someone's printing out blueprints, someone's laying them down. We would like to see that those blueprints are laid out in a secure environment. That's going to add rigor if you're manufacturing. But if you're more in the IT space, If you're more in the, I'm in the remote working space, well, that makes it a little easier, even for level 2, particularly for level 2. So the answer is that's the impact on your business. And I've been doing a lot of examinations, particularly around pricing. It's not prohibitively more expensive. Typically, I'll give you a pricing model. Microsoft, for the full kit and caboodle, costs you about $25 a month. Virtual infrastructure, I thought originally was another $25, but it wasn't. It turned out to be $10 to $15 per seat. So now you got about $35, $45 per person for a virtualized infrastructure for your company. So you have your Microsoft products. And so that's how we basically price it. And we can say, if I have a VDI, I've got a VPN, I've got a virtual cloud, Microsoft, this will work. All I have to do is do what I explained to Varetta before, is make sure all my security features are on, make sure I have policies in place, make sure I have procedures in place, make sure I understand the landscape, make sure I understand my information flows. Those are things that you can easily do, but you have to understand them. And by the way, just as I'm on the topic of information flows, an information flow would be like this. I get my RFP from sam.gov. Is it public or private information? Public means people can access it. Anyone can access it. And the answer is an RFP from sam.gov is not public information at that point in time. I then bid on the contract, still not contract information. I bid on the contract, I submit it, but then at some point I win it. Once I win it and that information gets incorporated into my contract, guess what? Now it becomes FCI. Because that's now information that I don't want to make public. It's not intended for public dissemination. Neither is my proposal, by the way. So those two elements have to be protected. And if I'm using a CRM system like Salesforce.com, you need to make sure that Salesforce itself, and I don't know the answer to this, but is Salesforce.com, is it FedRAMP certified? And if it is, guess what? We can then feel secure in logging into Salesforce, making sure we're using multi-factor authentication, that is being encrypted at the source and things like that. So that's how we would deal with our third parties. All right, so I kind of, hopefully I covered all that information. So, all right, and I got one from Wraith. Can small businesses use Orca security? Absolutely, the answer is yes. Cloudflare in one place of CMMC. It's not in place of CMMC because Orca security would just handle probably 2 domains out of the 14, or and 2 domains out of the 6. So it would cover pieces of it. So the answer is, yeah, use it. And because it probably means that you meet the practice objectives. So I can say, you're going to show me, I say, how do you do multi-factor authentication? How do you protect how do you identify users? How do you identify devices? I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to say, well, we use Orca security. Great. You just answered maybe 8 of my 20 questions, right? With that one statement. I'm going to ask you for policies and procedures to make sure it's being used by everyone. I want to see how Orca is integrated into your network. I'm going to ask other questions, but that by itself, it's not going to replace CMMC. But they would be components of the overall assessment. That would make it easier for an assessor to give you a MET rating. Okay.
Awesome. Any more questions? And Nadine, we did not get to your intro. If you could just introduce yourself quickly, your name, company, where you're calling in from, what is it you guys do? Nadine, you still there?
Oh, not me.
Go ahead, Nadine.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm still here. I'm just, my system's going in and
Okay, sound like she's having problems. All right, well,
she could write in the chat.
Yeah, just put your information in the chat, Nadine. That way we all have it. But thank you so much, Alan. Again, a wealth of information for us. And just to wrap this up, so again, and Alan mentioned it, the CMMC compliance is not only for Department of Defense. Other agencies are looking at what the Department of Defense is doing with it, and they're planning to use it if everything works out later on the line. What I liked about his presentation is he's telling us 2025 is coming and we have to be ready. And if you saw that timeline where just to get to level 1, we're looking at up to 4 months, right? So those are things that we need to start working on now. Quick question, Alan. How can you and Deltamine help small businesses get prepared?
Well, I kind of mentioned there's 2 aspects to CMMC certification, and unfortunately, the second aspect, the certification part, can't happen till next year. But the key part is this, and I'm going to get back not just on the slides here. It's a couple of these things. This readiness checklist is a starting point, but there's a lot more that you can actually put into your program. Particularly, this is really for level 1. But level 2, if you think about what your target CMMC level should be, it's on the types of contracts you want to bid on. And if you want to bid on DoD contracts of sensitive nature, and as you know, that requires clearances and so forth, that's fine. But here we're saying these don't require clearances for controlled unclassified information. These are going to be the first entry points into things like, can I provide, for example, services like drug testing services, which was one provider. Why is drug testing services? Why would they need to be CMMC certified? Because they're processing CUI. A soldier's information is sensitive. It's considered not FCI, it's CUI. The government's going to give you that information, which is private, personally identifiable information, plus controlled unclassified information. So the 2 together makes it valuable. So even somebody like a remote drug testing organization, they need CMMC certification. So we have to kind of look at that, and then that's where we provide consultations to say, do you have, like, we're going to ask you the same questions that are here. Do you have a security policy and procedure? And if you do, great. If you don't, you need someone to help you write it. Network diagram.
I guess the question I want to ask Alan is, so we've got folks here who may want to start working with different, whether it's Prime who already have those contracts in place, or they're looking at going after some of the opportunities under DoD, and they want to get ready for that. So can they come to you, Deltamine? Who can they come to if they want to do the first assessment?
Oh, well, that's, yeah, and it's not just myself. I mean, I have a whole team of CCPs, CMMC certified professionals who can come in and they can help you as much or as little as you need. If you need just a consultation, that's easy enough. If you need someone to help you, that's again, and our intent is to really kind of come up with a preparation service, meaning it's almost like your tax, your taxpayers, right? Your tax, you're doing your tax forms. We'll come in, we'll help prepare it, but the hardest part is going to be where you are the one at a level 1, you're the one signing off, not me, but I've got to explain it to you. I've got to create it for you. I've got to go through it with the owner, whoever's going to sign off and say, I'm attesting that this is true. And I'll tell you, I'm going to give you a short study, a case study very quickly before we close out. There was a small contractor, $300,000 a year. They were doing a contract for, it was for Medicare, and it was for children. And so they had contained all this information about, children who were covered under this program. It was a $300,000 contract. And then a whistleblower came in and said, oh, this wasn't even a whistleblower. Their information was breached. It was breached. And all of a sudden, the Justice Department came in and said, we have a whistleblower who just told us that you lied on your attestation. And guess what? They got fined $300,000. That was the total amount of their award. They lost. So in other words, they might as well not have even bid on the contract. But because they had a breach, they had lied about their security protections and the representations and certifications, they lost the contract. And by the way, the Justice Department now has, in the past few years, they just set up a cyber fraud division. That's what they're doing. They're looking for contracts where prime contractors primarily have lied. under search and reps. CMMC is going to make that much harder. And I'll say what they told me day one. The DoD will prosecute. That's what I was told. Not only will they prosecute the contractor, they will prosecute me if I was the one who let it slide. So you have to kind of be mindful that they're being very serious about this because they want to very much protect national security. So that, obviously it's for good reason. Beverly just asked a question. Beverly asked a question, are you saying that no certifications at any level will be obtained until, they can't be written in until there's a final rule. The final rule, legally speaking, they have a year. They have until next January, February. But even if they get it in by August, September, I don't think it's going to be written into any immediate contracts. It might be, don't get me wrong. It might be saying we're going to issue this contract with the expectation that CMMC is going to be in place. But no one's allowed to do CMMC certifications, so I can't do them until next year anyway. So even if it's in the contract, I can't do it. There is no CMMC program that stood up that's final for anybody, anyone. So don't, sometimes you're going to hear companies say, we're CMMC 2.0 certified, which I was with a defense contractor 2 weeks ago who told me that. And I said, impossible. As how do you know? I live in it every day. So no CMMC certifications. No one can tell you that they're CMMC certified until next year. And in fact, it'll probably be January or February of next year when they start.
And is it because they're in rulemaking right now?
Well, we're at the closing parts. Rulemaking ended. Right now, we're in the proposed phase while they're incorporating feedback. And that's got to, it goes through its, look, if you ask me, they had like 600 feedback responses. It would take me like a month to go through them. Well, they're taking 6 to 7 months to do it. I think, and hopefully I'm crossing my fingers that they'll get it done as early as August, as late as October, but most importantly, it has to be done before the election cycle begins. Because Congress, and we all know this, they don't do anything except complain about the other candidate. So that's all they do. So, and then they go and break in December. They don't come back till January.
Yep.
And then that's why I'm saying January. And I'm just kind of being a little more realistic. But guess what? If you remember my timeline, if you go back here in the timeline, where's the timeline? It's not the timeline, but yeah, here. The general time frame here. At CMMC level 1, 2 to 4 months, get ahead of it. At CMMC level 2, which I'll be honest with you, is the choice contracts. That's going to take 6 months to a year. Get ahead of it. And the reason I'm saying get ahead of it is because of that third bullet down, resource availability. There are less and less of assessors and CCPs out there than people think. And most companies are hogging up the CCPs. They're saying, ooh, I'm Boeing. I'm going to hire 25 of these guys. Okay. And then I'm Lockheed Martin. I'm going to hire 50 of these. Not Booz Allen, but Leidos is looking to hire about 150 of them. So you got to, and not for themselves, but also for their subcontractors. So you have to think about it. What's happening to those resources? They're going everywhere else. And a lot of them aren't necessarily going to be available for small businesses. So I say get ahead of it. Get ahead of that before it becomes problematic. Not only that, you don't have to do that deep dive and splurge and saying, oh, this is going to cost me $100,000. Budget away some funds from your contracts to say this is for cybersecurity controls and protection, and do a little a month, do a policy here today, and then do your scoring tomorrow. A lot of this stuff, if you do it little by little, in 6 months you'll have it all done. So the answer is that's how I would approach it if I was a small bit. Well, I am a small business, but that's how we've approached it. Although we have had some capital outlays, for example, when we did have to get our certifications and training in place. But that's an investment for us. So for you guys, the investment would be in investing in those things that you definitely will have to show an assessor, which is on this list. So you'll, like as Varetta mentioned, you will have that in your, it'll be posted on her website.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much, Alan. This was a lot of information, and I can tell you, as a small business, not only did I gain the information on what we need to do to get ready for this, but I also gained information on new opportunities where we can help other small businesses get ready. For those out there, if you guys are doing, whether it's creating graphics and different things, he talked about some of the flow charts, org charts, all these different things you need to start getting ready. as small businesses, we're not the ones always that have all these resources available to us. So that's where we come in, where we can partner with each other, help each other out with providing different services that we need. You had something else you want to say, Alan?
Yeah, I just posted on the site here. There's DoD mandatory compliance, and I told you that this is the free stuff that the government provides. So if you go to securityawareness.usalearning.gov, there's an entire section in there. And you know what? I'm going to just cut and paste this into the chat.
Yes.
So that way everyone can get access to it, because this is the free stuff. You know, the government gives us a lot of good free stuff. This is where you can get CUI training for free to get started. And, you know, you just click launch the course. But there's also here on the right-hand side is the access the official DoD CUI program website. So you learn about the program website directly from the DoD.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
thanks everybody. We're at the 3 o'clock mark, so I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you so much, Alan, again for presenting this. And again, we'll have this in our training portal for you to access. So thanks everyone. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.